Donald Trump has lived almost his entire life just out of the reach of the long arm of the law. Now the former president finds himself at the center of several criminal investigations all at once. And while you may be familiar with most of them, one of those inquiries has faded into the background. It involves an array of figures, from the former disgraced, twice impeached insurrectionist former president to his personal lawyers, one sitting senator, a governor, and even an acclaimed rapper. And it centers around a plot to overturn a state's presidential election results. Now, in normal times, this would be the biggest, most scandalous story out there, but these aren't normal times. We live in a world of insurrections and FBI searches of a home of a former president. So let me refresh your memory on Georgia's election investigation. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis convened a special grand jury to look into the efforts of Donald Trump and his allies to reverse Joe Biden's election win in Georgia. The investigation has intensified this summer, zeroing in on several members of Trump's inner circle, including his former personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Now, every villain needs a trusty little sidekick, and that was Giuliani to Trump. The former mayor of New York and failed presidential candidate himself went around Georgia peddling election conspiracies while trying to find votes that simply weren't there. Giuliani stood before Georgia lawmakers on several occasions, claiming to have evidence of widespread voter fraud, which he did not. He claimed Dominion voting systems machines flipped thousands of votes in Biden's favor, for which he is being sued by Dominion. He spread a theory that illegal ballots had been stashed in suitcases under a table at a ballot tabulation center. He claimed there was rampant underage voting, even voting from the grave, all of which were investigated and largely debunked. Giuliani never found those votes for Donald Trump. He did, however, have his law license suspended in the state of New York, and now Giuliani is a target of Georgia's ongoing inquiry, which means he could be indicted depending on how the investigation develops. Giuliani was subpoenaed by the Fulton County DA, Willis, and spent 6 hours before the grand jury on Wednesday. Not clear what was said in those closed-door meetings. Next, we've got the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Like Giuliani, a lawyer by training. A federal judge has denied Lindsey Graham's latest attempt to escape a subpoena, and now Senator Graham is on track to appear in a closed-door session before that very same grand jury in Atlanta on Tuesday. DA Willis is investigating a pair of post-election phone calls that Senator Graham made to Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Raffensperger said Graham pressed him about whether he had the power to reject certain absentee ballots, which Raffensperger interpreted as a suggestion to toss out some very legally cast votes. Senator Graham and his lawyers say he was well within his rights to discuss election processes with Raffensperger and that he made those calls in his then role as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Georgia's Republican governor himself, Brian Kemp, is also trying to avoid a subpoena from the Fulton County grand jury. He filed a motion last week alleging that the probe is being pursued for, quote, improper political purposes. He asked the court to kill the subpoena that was requiring him to testify later this month. But Governor Kemp is not in the same boat as Giuliani and Graham. Kemp actually stood up for democracy in this instance and fended off pressure from Trump to overturn the election results. DA Willis even described Kemp as a mere witness who acted honorably. So it's not clear why he's fighting this thing. He probably just doesn't want to be on Trump's bad side. Something else being investigated by the Fulton County grand jury are the efforts by the Trump campaign to create a fake list of electors to cast fraudulent electoral votes for Congress for certification. The DA has notified all 16 fake electors in the state, letting them know that they, too, are considered targets of the investigation, not witnesses. We know from the House January 6th committee hearings and from separate Department of Justice investigations that Giuliani, John Eastman, another Trump lawyer, and Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official, were involved in the fake electors scheme in Georgia and in other states. Now, you probably knew about all of this, except this: Kanye West. Georgia investigators reportedly sought testimony from one of Kanye's former publicists who allegedly pressured an election worker. We're eager to learn more about this particular aspect of the case. But now we've reached the head honcho, the former president of the United States, the person most committed to the big lie in Georgia and across the country. He himself spread countless lies and conspiracies about election fraud, but the grand jury is undoubtedly most interested in that notorious phone call.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
I just want to find 11,780 votes. Donald Trump has not been summoned or subpoenaed by the Fulton County DA, but this investigation is still pretty young. DA Willis does not have the same limitations as the Department of Justice because she's operating under state laws. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.